Good morning and a very warm welcome at the second day of CII Summit FX. Hope you enjoyed listening to the speakers who spoke at very interesting sessions yesterday. The sessions lined up for today will surely give you many takeaways. We'll start with the day with the first session, Incentives and Funding Process. May I now invite on stage Sri Prithul Kumar, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India, and Managing Director, National Film Development Corporation. Mr. Biren Ghosh, Chairman, CII National AVGC Committee, Vice Chairman, CII National Media and Entertainment Committee, and Country Head, Technicolor India. Mr. Sriram Chandrasekhar, Founder and CEO, Broadvision Plus, Studio 56. Mr. Manoj Mishra, CEO, Power Kids Entertainment. Mr. Virendra Patil, Creative Director, Zebu Animation Studios. Mr. R.K. Chand, Executive Director, Creative Production and Operations, The Mill India. And Ms. Vrinda Sood, CEO, Citrus Inc. Studios.
Morning, everyone. Day 2. Welcome to Summit FX 23. Sri Prithul Kumarji, you have been in conversation with many folks in the industry and with the associations in terms of how we can use the government support that has been announced in order for us to increase the capacity and increase the business within the AVGC sector in India. Very grateful to the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting to extend the focus from the traditional live action film and television to encompass the animation and visual effects industry. As we mentioned in the inauguration yesterday, when we had the pleasure of having the Secretary, Shri Apurva Chandraji, with us, he had mentioned that while this scheme has been announced, there are currently no takers for the scheme as yet. And therefore, in our conversation while we were arranging this conference, we said that we would have a focused and dedicated panel. There are many people in the audience who have a tremendous amount of experience in co-productions, in production between countries. Most of us know that AVGC is, generally speaking, a game played by a global ecosystem. Probably around 80% or more, or 90% of global TV series in animation are made with 2 or more countries getting together. Very few world majors are those that actually commission and give their episodes to be made, in a service method. And India is currently not a major player in that whole story. There are many reasons for that. And therefore, we have tried to select a panel of participants who have very different needs from each other. Some are pure services, some are IP, some are portfolio, some work with international funds and content. Some have been doing co-productions and availing of government treaties in different countries. And there are many folks, here. We had the pleasure of hearing Jayakumarji yesterday, who probably has done more co-productions over many more years than others, and many other participants in this area. So without further ado, the way that I think we will be getting the best out of this panel is, first of all, sir, to hear from you, from Prithul Kumarji. There's going to be, after that, a presentation from FFO that will explain how the incentives have been structured. And thereafter, we would like for the panelists to please present their viewpoint in terms of how this works. So thank you very much for attending. And sir, Prithul Kumarji, can we please get you to give us your opening address? Thank you.
A very good morning to all of you. And first of all, thank you to CII for organizing this wonderful conference. And thank you, Biren, for considering to keep such a session, because it's these incentives which we're going to talk about today. They were announced by the government in 2022 April. And till now, as he said, that there's been one incentive which has been granted, and 4 or 5 are more in pipeline. But the government looked at the incentives in a much keener way to not just allow the film shootings in India to have more of film tourism, but we also recognized that the animation and visual effects, which are the key components of our films today, they should be our country should become a production hub for that, and which was already going in that direction, and government had already recognized the potential of AVGC sector, and a task force had been simultaneously created last year to look into how we can further promote the AVGC sector. And although the incentives are as a part of films, we are trying to incentivize the animation and visual effects which is getting done in India. But soon, with the AVGC task force recommendations, even the animation and visual effects which are being used in other segments like gaming and even in comics, and also the domestic component of it, would soon find something to be supported by the government. So the government is already, we did a workshop in May, if I'm correct, that we got the states and the industry stakeholder together. And we tried to educate the states also that state also need to have their own state AVGC policy. We are, at the same time, we are also working on a national AVGC policy. So, and these incentives, my friends will come and talk about it more in detail. Right now, the incentives, they serve the purpose for whatever work is getting done in India as for VFX and animation in regard to films, TV series, and other components of audiovisual productions. They are being incentivized to up to an extent of 2 crores. And the government, I would like to let you know that we also realize that in the world over, in the format of filmmaking, most of the films, they are having VFX spends of 30 to 40% of the production budgets. So we understood that there is far more requirement of enhancing this limit, what is presently there of 2 crores. And the government, I can assure you, is working on that, and we soon have some figures which will be much more than that. With this, I think I'd like to hear more from the panelists, but before that, I think FFO should make the presentation to tell you exactly what the incentives are about. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ram Kumar Vijayan. I'm from the Film Facilitation Office. I head marketing there, and you're part of Invest India and the National Film Development Corporation, and sponsored by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, for those who know or don't know who we are. So I'll just get to the brass tacks. Where we are, that's what you all come here to listen for early in the morning, the incentives for animation and VFX services. Basically, in Cannes last year, on the 16th of May 2022, to be precise, the Honorable Minister for Information and Broadcasting announced that India is finally going to have an incentives program for the film and allied sectors. And 2 incentive programs were announced. Just to give you, these 2 slides, I'm sure is like preaching to the Pope. So I'll skip over these just to set in context why we need to promote. You all know that you have been in the business more than that. So you are all contributing to this phenomenal growth in the sector of 20-25% projected over the next 3 years. But it's still a very small share of the global market. And of course, you have a great domestic demand as well. As Pritul sir said, the AVGC task force recommendations, when they will be implemented, as and when they are being implemented, they'll have a sea change in the sector in terms of skills and etc. And what India offers, what you all offer, is the great cost advantage, the great talent, the major studios. Biren sir is here, expanding there, and the Indian companies coming up so much and so forcefully. So all this is putting us in a very sweet spot at the right moment, and that's where the government has to come in. And the government has come forward by setting up an enabling environment, the Film Facilitation Office, to blow my own horn. We are facilitating filming permissions in India since 2016, and the grant of official co-production status. We also facilitate all the other permits, setting up a ecosystem. And from last year, the FFO has been administering the incentives program. So coming to what the incentive scheme is, there are two schemes. The one for international production, and that's the production that is approved by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting after the 1st of April 2022. Of course, now anything that stands now is there. This also includes animation, visual effects, and post-production services. The application has to be made by the Indian service company. The minimum qualifying production expenditure is rupees 2.5 crores. So the expenditure that would be incurred in India, that's what it means. There are certain inclusions and exclusions. That's there in the guidelines. We can go through them. In fact, there is a small booklet in front of you which has the guidelines. So maybe you can also refer them for further details. And what we offer is 30% of the qualifying production expenditure, which will be reimbursed. But as of now, there is a cap of 2 crores for that. So maximum of 2 crores or 30%, whichever is lower. And apart from that, there is a 5% bonus for employing 15% or more Indian labor. I'm sure all services companies would qualify for that as well. So effectively, it's 35% reimbursement and up to a limit of 2.5 crores. That's for the international productions, which are out of the scope of the official co-production treaties. The other scheme is for the international co-productions. In fact, animation films are a large chunk of the international co-productions that we have approved till now. In fact, 5 of the 20 have been animation films that have been granted co-production status, official co-production status, I mean. India has treaties with 16 countries for co-production, audiovisual co-production. And if you have the films or projects under those treaties, they qualify for this scheme. The Indian co-producer has to apply, and again 30% of the qualifying production expenditure is reimbursed. The cap is 2 crores. And all these I am putting a caveat, and again, this is as per the scheme as it exists right now. The speciality of the scheme under the co-production is that it can be claimed in 2 stages. You can have the first disbursal after spending 50% of the approved amount, and subsequently you can claim for the final disbursal as well. How do you apply? So there is a 2-stage process. First, it's actually a 3-stage process. First, you have to get the permission from the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting through the FFO, and then apply for the interim approval. This is right before you start production. There is a form available on the FFO website, which is given at the bottom of the slide. And then you need to have the agreement with the foreign production company or the producer available, the production schedule, and the estimated budget. The documentation is more or less the same for both the production as well as the co-production incentives. And the most important thing is that you have to apply 4 weeks, at least 4 weeks before the start of production, as the guidelines stand now. After you have got your interim approval, you can start the production. And then once you're done, 90 days from your finish of production in India, you can apply for the disbursal. You need to send us the copy of the agreements, audited expense statements, invoices, and there are certain declarations in the prescribed format. That is within 90 days of finish of production. I would like to tell most of the guidelines are given as for live shoots, but they all apply for animation, VFX, production, post-production services as well. So the guidelines and forms are available on www.ffo.gov.in. This is the process. So once you obtain the permission, you have to apply for interim approval within 4 weeks after that, and 4 weeks before start of production. Complete your production. Within 90 days, you submit your application for disbursal. We have an auditor who scrutinizes the documents, so all your accounts have to be submitted, and the auditor and the FFO processes the documents within 60 days, and there is a committee that meets. Normally, within 90 days, we have been able to give the decision. So the disbursal process is also 15% is given immediately. If there is a 85% is given immediately in case of your process, and the 15% is given after submission of credits, with saying that it's been supported by the Ministry of Information Broadcasting and the FFO. So this is basically the process. So once all the documents are submitted, 60 to 90 days, we are able to give the incentives. This is basically what we are giving, and my email ID is given. If you have any questions, or if you have any requirements, any doubts, please reach out. That's it from my side. Thank you so much. And now the panel will take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. There are questions that will be coming out from the panel. So we'd like for CII to take note of that and to follow up for a follow-up meeting, because in half an hour or 1 hour, now that we have a large corpus and including a potentially increasing corpus, it is not easy to pay out 10 to 12 crores to the panel at this 1 hour's period. So we will definitely follow up on this. One of the questions that came up, and I think the panel would like to know, is that how is this going to be evaluated? 2 points come out of moving from live action to animation and visual effects. Number one, can we tweak whatever is not required so that in the ease of application and disbursement, we will be able to do this more easily for co-productions and for incentives. The second question that came up is the evaluation of this. So perhaps the government may think of including 1 or 2 people from the industry that understand international co-productions, etc. Obviously, they will recuse themselves if they have an interest in that particular proposal, but would be good to have members from the industry participate in that evaluation. So those 2 points, I think, may be noted. And let's start now from the panel. So I will start first by requesting each of the panelists to maybe speak for 5 minutes, and then we will have a conversation with the audience, and then we can have closing remarks. So I'm going to start from my extreme right with Sriram. If you can please look at your perspective on these incentives and how you think we should be taking it forward. And in your case in particular, what is the most exciting or interesting from this?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Biren, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for putting this together. Firstly, I would like to make some comments about this scheme. This is a very good scheme and very good step in the right direction. And I want to thank the government, all the key players in this involved from the entire spectrum. I also want to share with some of our experiences of actually putting together a co-production agreement. It was in 2020, in the peak of COVID, that we actually progressed in this co-production agreement. And we found out that India and Germany had a treaty that was signed in February of 2007, 13 years ago, for doing audiovisual co-productions together, and there was no incentive at that time. There is no monetary benefit for an Indian company to do it, but you can, free movement of people, systems, and we also thought it is prestigious. If the country has signed an agreement as a sovereign nation with another developed country, and it has never been used, we thought it is very wrong for it to be like that. And that is the primary reason why we went ahead. There was no direct benefit for us financially, but we did it as, thinking as a country or as an industry. and COVID happened, and actually our application forms were in May 2020, in the peak of COVID. Still, the government was so proactive and efficient, and I want this to be mentioned in the stage, Mr. Prithul also, because the entire team was so proactive. They wanted to make it happen. They had the government offices open during COVID and they got this cleared, and that was very helpful actually. And the entire movie, Mia and Me, it is called, The Hero of Centopia, it is released in Europe and it has done very well, and it is sold in many other countries as well. Um, and this particular project was delivered over the next 18 months, you know. And then we also found out that there have been at least 15 countries with whom the government has actually bothered to sign a treaty agreement, and nothing has happened under it, probably because there is no monetary incentive, you know. So right now, putting this incentive together will definitely propel this. But having said that, I also want to indicate some caveats or some cautionary steps, because the good thing about the Indian industry is it's more than 100 years old. You know, if we all look at it as filmmaking, the first movies in India was done more than 100 years old, and it is completely propelled by creativity, passion, entrepreneurial drive, and energy, creative energy. And we are really a very strong industry compared to the global many other countries, I would say. So when the government is kind of touching the industry, it should be good for the country. That's my main intent in this. And it will be good for the country if it is structured right. So to that extent, my submission and recommendation, even though some of it will be disadvantageous to Broad Vision, our company, and Studio 56, our own animation studio, is that if we try to incentivize service work alone, it may or may not happen very well. Because what happens is that the negotiating party already factors in the incentive and tries to bring your value down by that much. So as a country, we may not gain much. But in co-productions, I think it is a good step, because a co-production demonstrates that there is a broadcaster interest outside of India, and therefore the revenue flows from the IP can come into India from outside of India. And that, according to me, is a major benefit for India. And then the Indian creators, whatever is created by Indian creators, that should also be given the right impetus, you know, and it should be structured very carefully, but it should definitely be given impetus. And I would really request if the government can put attention on the national broadcast industry, you know, revamping Doordarshan, revamping, creating an OTT platform through Doordarshan and these areas. Because if we get the national broadcast infrastructure in place, the creators will get a big boost, you know. And these are my thoughts, and I thank you again, Viren.
Thanks very much for all of those points. And may I then now request Manoj, who sees this from a very, very different perspective. Manoj has been one of the champions of our industry that started from understanding how licensing can give life to content. And obviously then the content world has subsumed him much in a far greater manner thereafter. But understanding how this works in a larger footprint and how this can be how you can make this more practical and easy for companies like yourself and businesses like yourself will be wonderful.
So first of all, I would like to say that this is a welcome change. I mean, to be very honest with you, such kind of incentive, such kind of scheme really helps boost an organization who wants to get into co-production or an IP production as such. So my mind started ticking that how will I utilize this in my ongoing projects, because that is what is something which is very important. And I would like to share a case study with you where I say that, I have a project in hand at this moment where I already have a French broadcaster on board. I have a broadcaster from MENA, Middle East, who's also co-producing that show. And that show I want to, because first of all, you have to understand that what part of work on international co-production you would like to execute in India, because that is very important. So pre and post is taken care of by my broadcasters, French broadcaster in Europe. And then when it comes to animation production, that's where I see that, this scheme is going to really help us out. Because in the scheme of doing the animation production, there's always a gap in the budget which is there. So there are so many studios based out of India who would like to, small studios who would like to utilize this opportunity. From my perspective, what I see is that I'm going to get in touch with one of these studios there based in India itself, and I'll tell them that, come become a part of co-production partner for this show. Take this incentive, utilize this, and do the show so that we can sell it globally and make it successful. So this is a classic example how I would love to utilize this fund which is there. Of course, there's a limit to this fund which is there, but at the same time, as I said, it's a welcome change.
Thank you very much, Manoj. I'm going to now pass it on to Chand, R.K. Chand, to give his perspective. Maybe from a services point of view, but how we can also bring in original content or creation of content or co-production with a service anchor. Manoj has spoken about the fact that while he will look at this as co-production, but then he will go to a service provider as a studio, and this fund can help on both the fronts.
I'm keeping it very simple. I think we are in a market where at least 25% of the year we're going to have bench time for service studios. The bench time is increasing day by day with strikes, with volatile forces all around. I see this incentive as being that breather in between, because the margins are not much, between 10 to 15%, if you're lucky 18%. Now, so if you are not having work for that much percentage of the time in the year, then that bench time is going to eat into the margins that we have as a studio. So if we have up to 5% of labor and 20% of incentive coming in for any form of work, whether we are doing it, co-production is great only when you have rights to the IP, but beyond that, there is also the sweat equity that comes into play in there. So at that stage, when we have sweat, innovative service. So I think at that stage, I think the benefit that we definitely see is it benefiting services industry by helping that gap. Whenever you have a bench time, it will help them breather to sail through that phase, because you don't have back-to-back projects going on. The timeline is crucial. I think the 4 weeks of application and 90 days of processing. I think if the paperwork is more transparent, if we do a few workshops as we discussed earlier, and we look at a few case studies, separate case studies for services and for co-production, then it will be easier. Because co-financing, co-production and services, all three seems to be put together into a single part. But as a larger services industry, I think we have not really benefited and used it as much as the chance is there in this right now, especially in the current market when we have so much of risk going on for work flowing into India.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Can I come to Viren Patil, please?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Like everyone said, I think this is a wonderful incentive, and I think we are all going to benefit from it. And the first step, it's a first step in the right direction, and we are very excited. I want to take this to a slightly different direction. As a nation, as we aspire to create content in our country and to become a developed a nation that creates content, education, the quality of education in terms of for our industry also needs to be looked at. And so we have started a school which is a Section 8 company, and we are a small company. We are trying to incentivize and fund this as much as we can. That is one area, right? Because one of the things that we really need is creative thinking, lateral thinking capabilities within us that has to evolve, special reasoning skill that is mandatory for an artist. All these things are necessary. And the second part that I would like to touch upon is I consider all of us as startup mindset leaders. What the industry now needs as it goes into the second phase of its evolution is the next generation of creative leadership that can take this industry further and forward. Because we know we have brought it to this point. What we need is the next generation that can take this to the distance it can really go. So those are my couple of points.
Thank you very much. We'd like to hear from a younger startup in India as to how you look at these incentives and what it can do in order to turbocharge you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, CII, for having me and amongst this extinguished panel, especially. So, with my limited experience, whatever I've experienced outside, when we go and meet people, the first question is always that, while we're asking for services, but, everybody wants to be doing co-productions these days. And the first question is, do you do co-productions? Do you have tax breaks? And earlier we didn't, and now thankfully we can say yes to that. And that gives us a little edge, and we become one of the preferred options. And the second thing now is that how much is the tax break and how to avail it. So thankfully we are answering all of that also over here today, and that will also give us an edge or make us even more preferred. And with these incentives in place now, it is giving us an opportunity also to be doing some development work, which earlier could have been, a barrier. With with these tax incentives, if we could do IP development for ourselves and take them up, outside and co-produce, I think that, all of this is going to help us there as well, apart from the various other, things that we've already discussed here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very efficient panel, leaving 5 to 10 minutes for audience questions, which sometimes does not happen. So, Sushil Basinji, you have your hand up. Can we have a mic up in the front table? And then we have a gentleman at the back who already has a mic. So why don't you go first, sir, since you have the mic? Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All the august speakers, I had a question about financing international production or co-production or production in India. There are norms which are not known to new producers, new entrants. I want to know if we as a new producers form a group and come together as a cooperative producer, are these august speakers ready to come forward to help us?
I'm sure you will find that there will be 8 yeses from the 7 of us, but yes, we can.
Okay, now my second question. Second question is about a professional international cast and crew. When we call them here to shoot or direct, professional agencies like Western India Cinematographers Association charges facilitation fee per day. Is this over now?
We'll come back to that question when we wrap up. Thank you very much. Sushilji.
We have done co-production with US, Mexico, Netherlands, and now we are going to do with Italy. We never availed any kind of incentive either here because it was not there, and other countries as well. Then we came to know there are incentives in Canada for co-production, and we explored that treaty and we found that there are some technical glitches, like if we have to avail the incentive in Canada, then all creative work has to be in Canada. That means they say that director and road story should be from Canada, and if we want to take incentive, we cannot have production in India which will be not qualified as a creative content. And in animation, everything is creative. So I want to understand, is there any qualifying criteria like this for incentive availing in India?
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. So would you like to respond?
So I don't know how many of the questions I remember, but most of the questions, actually the answers are the same. So let me, just give you a brief outline. Let me begin by what you asked in the end. Is that, do we also have some kind of a qualifying expend on the incentive which we grant? So yes, India does have that, but that is over and above the 30%, which is unqualified. So whatever expenditure is being done in India in film shooting or for production or for post-production, that automatically qualifies. So we have an over and above incentivization of 5% if the people used in doing all of this were Indian to a certain extent. So that Make in India concept component is awarded an extra incentive. But we don't differentiate at the basic level that any foreign producer who's coming here, spending money and doing film production by way of shooting or post-production, he is granted that incentive. Now, coming to the much broader perspective, what incentives are about. So, incentives are primarily about two things. A, we are trying to incentivize people to, international community to get work done in India, either by coming here to shoot or getting the post-production or the production work done here. B, our intent for incentive goes way beyond that. And as you are aware that India has already signed 16 co-production treaties with 16 countries. And I think today the cabinet is picking up the 17th one with Colombia. So this is primarily done so that, two producers from both these countries get together and they can not just avail the incentives, but probably, the cultural exchange also takes place and the stories which are culled down, because ultimately these, the films which comes out of the co-production is the national film for both these countries. So they get a larger audience exposure, not just this country, but the other country from where the other co-producer is. So the idea is way beyond just get the work done in India, but also the stories and the cultures amalgamating. So that's how the countries sign these treaties, and under that umbrella treaty, these co-productions happen. I would not agree that we should only foster this co-production, as Saurabh said in the beginning, Sriram said in the beginning. So it's also that we need to also grow our industry domestically. So we need to incentivize people from outside to come here and do the work, get the work done over here in India from our companies, from our industries. So that is why the incentives are also meant for that also. I think a couple of points also came about FFO. In fact, I would rate FFO as such a brilliant organization. I'll give you some 4 or 5 reasons about it. It came into being in 2016 when the government decided that a film facilitation office needs to be created, which will facilitate only the foreign film producers to come here and shoot in India. So that was how it began. And before that, I think we had only 4 or 5 co-production agreements, and all of them, mind you, have come after that. And initially, we didn't have incentives. The incentives have also started last year. But FFO had, from the very beginning, when all of this was launched, the Film Facilitation Office had given a commitment that the film visas or the film permissions for coming to shoot in India would be given in 28 days, if I'm not wrong. 28? 21 days. Okay. So 21 days. And mind you, some of them not just require them to process the approvals with the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, but some of them also require, wherein the film shooting also requires the approvals from the MHA, Ministry of Home Affairs. And as we talk today, after 8 years of this Film Facilitation Office into being, still the average is 19 days, which is phenomenal for such a coordination to happen. And I mean, you can also see that how this organization functioned is that there was so much of a pressure on the ministry that why this Film Facilitation Office is only working for international producers. So in 2019, we were forced because of, the domestic producers wanting that we should also facilitate their filming permissions and other permissions which are required. So in 2019, these services had to be opened up also for domestic producers. So as we speak today, we have just opened up all that. And now looking forward, what we're trying to do in this Film Facilitation Office is that we realize that, although how much you try to monitor for the individual clearances which a filmmaker requires, I think an IT ecosystem is what is required, and we need to get all these stakeholders onboarded into our IT portal. So with the help of Invest India, we have already sort of envisaged this kind of IT system, which will not just onboard the states which are having their own IT ecosystem to grant the permissions, but most of the states, 90% of them, I would say, they don't have an IT ecosystem. So we're trying to provide a sandbox to them through this IT portal, that you just adopt this IT system with your officials, with your departments, and give this permission to the industry online and in a much facilitated manner. So that RFP is already there. I'm sure that by the next FX Summit, we should be ready with something like that, which will be truly facilitating everyone to the maximum possible for filming. I think any other question which I left to answer?
Ashish and then Ankur, you got the mic now.
Pratulji, I wanted to understand what is the total quantum of funds available in a fiscal year under this policy, and the 2.5 crore benefit that's available, I'm assuming, is per project. Is there a cap per organization in a fiscal year? The reason I ask is that otherwise there will be same issues that we have with SEIS, wherein there would be a few majors who would go ahead and empty the kitty and MSMEs would be left struggling.
So as of now, the cap on every incentive which can be availed is 2.5 crore, depending on that. But there is no as such budgetary cap. In fact, we were last year also, we struggled, but we could not utilize the full budget which the ministry had allocated to it, because we could not have eligible people coming forward to avail this incentive. Yes, last year was this thing. We also had stipulated that only the agreements which are signed after the 1st of April 2022, they could only avail. But right now also, as I told you before, that we have about 6-7 in the pipeline and not more. And then I don't think so there's any problem budget. But when I was also speaking about that, we are considering that the per capita maximum limit needs to be increased. So, I mean, we have kept that point in mind, that it can be taken away all at once. So, so then we are also making a budget stipulation so that, we don't have a budget constraint, as in if there are big takers. So it will always be there. And in fact, as I told you, that it is for post-production, it is for shooting. So we will also make sure that, the shooting doesn't take away everything and there is nothing left for post-production. So something like that has to come. We're deliberating with the stakeholders, and I assure you on that.
Good morning, sir. In fact, the co-productions, all of us have done several co-productions in the last 25 years, irrespective of the policy. And now that the policy is there, utilizing the policy is a little difficult, because the ecosystem that requires to be created within Film Facilitation Office, the focus was looking into people coming into India for shoot to start with. Now, people coming into India to outsource the work in animation visual effects would be an added advantage. But when Sir talked about the Canadian co-production, I have done 2 Canadian co-productions. The issue there is the studio in India has to first partner with studio in Canada, agree upon the idea. Then Canadian studio takes it to Canada Telefilm for film and Canada Media Fund for the television series. And they also have provincial funds, which is the state's parallel in India. And they would actually access fund from there. The condition is that X amount of work would be done in that country and X amount of work which can be done into our country. But we will have to come up with a matching fund of a particular kind, which studios on there participated with that fund as of today. But the key condition was, in the film, you needed to have a distributor on board before they gave a sanction of the co-production. In case of television series, you had to have a television broadcaster in India and television broadcaster in Canada on board signed as you move forward. Now, these conditions are very difficult to meet, and that's why our proposition is to look at a holistic approach for animation, because this is a lifeline for almost 34 crore kids and their programming, which shapes their life and future. And it's a responsibility of animation creators that they give them the right stories at the right time, so that they are nurtured properly and taken to the next level. So it's a national responsibility. It's a responsibility of the content creators, especially because the kids would never come and tell us that this is what I want. They would always watch what is given to them. And that's why there has to be a differentiation in 2 things. One is that we need DD kits for sure, because greenlighting these shows would be very critical, because in India, all the foreign channels in the kids space take away all the IP, so they are out of co-production. So we cannot actually exercise any co-production with those countries. If we have the incentive, if you can differentiate that if it's a green lighting of Indian idea, the incentive would be 3 times or 4 times. And then it would start making sense for Indian creators to really see. And there has to be a homegrown DD kids which can greenlight that idea. Because without that, the co-production will not become relevant as far as animation is concerned. Visual effects would fit into live action very, very nicely, but there has to be a differentiation for these two. And if we are not spending that money in India, which is coming as an incentive to through the Indian studio, then we are giving away that money to the foreign studios. No country does that. So I think we will have to really look at this implementation policy with this areas in mind.
Thank you, Ashish. So, questions in the question. So, to answer your question, that these incentives really deal about what is getting there in filmmaking. So, what you're talking about also goes into the domain of promotion of AVGC. So, that is, I would say that will be definitely taken up separately, like creating a DD Kids channel and things like that. But yes, we of course understand that too much of constraints deters the filmmakers. And a case like yours, you saying about Canada, that they required this and they have this kind of a precondition. And mind you, the kind of incentive which we have rolled out, it doesn't have a precondition, except for that the money has to come from outside and get invested into India. So nothing like that is still there, and neither are we contemplating anything like that. For the animation or the visual effects production incentives, we are trying to make it as simple as possible. With whatever comments we had, it will probably be only the invoices and the MOU and just the remittances made, and probably that will satisfy. We're not getting into how many man hours of this and that. So, it unnecessarily complicates the process, and it unnecessarily delays the process also, I'll say. In fact, one of the incentives which we have given after that, we have embarked upon the journey of understanding how good we were or how bad we were in delivering that incentive. And we realized that we gave that incentive in about 68 days. So we thought that we were really bad because we did 2 iterations with the person who had applied with the incentive. And we required some more documents and all that, which probably was not specified, or maybe he did not understand correctly. So, but then we also studied with the help of motion pictures and other associations. We sort of, studied other countries. So most of the countries, from the date of application of incentive, they say we will take at least 90 days for disposal. So I will say that India was, India being the worst at our thought, but still it was the best from that point of view. And we are trying to further improve on that. We are trying to, simplify the processes, make it online, make whatever documents are required, whatever formats are required. We're going to stipulate that. We are already working in the background, and we are trying to make it simple. You be rest assured from India's part.
We are a quick one, because we are 10 minutes over. Go ahead.
Are gaming companies included in the incentive scheme, sir? The gaming companies providing service from India?
Not in this one.
So I think we accomplished a very important mission, which is to try to give greater clarity to the whole subject. In the closing comments, I will say the following. There is a very famous saying: never look a gift horse in the mouth. When you are getting something, please take it, because that is the government is humorously expressing a minor level of frustration, which has been very well articulated by Pritul Kumarji, in that you ask for something, it is on the table, please come forward and take it. We'll take questions offline because we're 10 minutes over.
I have a very, very quick question.
The question cannot be answered, but please raise it so we know.
Yeah, I will raise it so that people can think about it. Yeah. One, excellent that the incentives are coming into play. Superb move. But I see the timelines that you have is a post animation production that you have to apply for a reimbursement. The problem with the smaller companies is that they need what is called gap financing. So I would suggest that the ministry should look at very seriously that the financial institutions can somehow be brought into play, so that when there is a system where you're applying for an incentive, that financial institutions can extend those finances to you for you to be able to do your productions, because the production period is a very long period.
That's a good point. I think it was mentioned by some of the speakers and has been taken into account and will be taken into account as we do the post-event report. Thank you for that, Tony. So I just wanted to say that there were a couple of comments made, and I say that, we have something on the table, let's utilize it. So the first thing I would like to say to you, Pritulji, and to the ministry is that at CII, we will continue this conversation. At CII, we will continue to ensure that you receive applications up to rupees 50 crores between now and the next Summit FX. This is the project that we will work on. I'm taking that at 2.5, so if you give more, the 50 will be more also. That's something we can utilize without much difficulty. I think the simplicity with which you are approaching this is fine. I think there is some confusion between the way funds are given abroad and what we are trying to do. To Sushilji's comment, he's talking about funds which are co-production funds, whereas we are talking about an incentive fund based on incentives. So there are different elements, but we can sort this out. And I think this workshop and this understanding needs to continue. Many of the asks, I think post the AVGC policy coming out, we can even talk about development funds separately. But at the moment, as I say, this is a fantastic opportunity. To Sriram's comment, I will say that he is quite right. Countries have used the strategy of making sure that they can compete with their neighbors. So in Canada, for example, the reason that the funds get provided is because they will never be able to stand up to the might of Hollywood. And for their creative community to flourish, they give incentives which are similar to ours for the services industry. But what happens as a result is that while he is quite right, that ultimately it lands up as a discounting in favor of someone else. But at the same time, it helps the country to grow. Others, they would never have the production in Montreal or Toronto or in Vancouver that they do. So it helps the country overall, although the beneficiary may be someone different. So while we want India to grow, in this conference in the last 2 days, and in every conference, like we have Invest India, we have members from the UK, we have members from Canada. Yesterday, I met a person from the London Mayor's office. They have the same objective. For years, in all of our conferences at CII and other associations, we have people who come here in order for us to help you to invest in their country. We are doing nothing different. We are doing exactly what the world does, saying, can we please make sure that India becomes a participant and gets money into India from people in services, from people that want to be in co-production. So I think this is it's a really beneficial program for the country, and other suggestions that we have to make the creative community funded can be in addition to these incentives in time to come. So I'd like to first of all, continue that conversation, make sure that the very varied asks that we have here can somehow be tailored into a follow-up meeting with FFO and with your team, sir, and that we will ensure that when we meet here the next time, we will be asking you for more. So thank you very much. A big round of applause to the ministry and to everyone.
Thank you very much, panelists. We would now present you the token of appreciation. Would request Mr. Ghosh to kindly hand it over to the panelists, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for everything. We should have gone with ladies first. Yeah. What to do? She's the youngest, no? So. Linda, come on. We should have got you first. But, now it is gender equality, na? So we find it.
Would request the panelists for a group photograph, please.
Everybody done?
Can we have a group photograph, please?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.